Hello everyone, so let's talk about how Ethan Klein was incredibly blatantly and obviously racist against Arabs in his debate with Hassan Piker, while his crew member and researcher Abdul Ayad, who likes to frame himself as like the only good Arab and a good representative of Arab people, sat there obediently, said nothing, and actually kept feeding Ethan Zionist talking points to spew. So there was a moment in this debate where Ethan Klein talked about Arabs in this very blatantly conspirational and despective way, in very much the same way that a Nazi conspiracy theorist would talk about Jews. You know, a Nazi would use terms like the Jews and talk about Jews as if they were one like hive mind collective working towards some sort of incredibly negative goal. And this is precisely how Ethan talks about Arabs. A lot of people have been focusing on Ethan's particular comment where he said the fucking Arabs, and he did say that, and that is racist in of itself, but beyond that, the fact that he keeps talking about the Arabs as this hive mind collective who are collectively responsible for what he framed as this uniform mass expulsion of Jews by the Arabs is even worse than that. So let me show you the clip here.
900,000 Jews, approximately 700 to 900,000, were forced to become Zionists, not by choice, but because they were forced out. The vast majority went to the fucking Arabs. The anti-Semitic Arabs.
There you go.
There you go. What? That's my point.
Here's a further demonstration of this.
And I don't know if your audience gets this as well, but what you just said earlier is not an accurate reflection of history. It's just
How do you know
pure racism.
How do you know that?
How
do you know that it's not real?
Shifting the blame over to the
absolutely
entirety of Arabs
was the blame
at
of the
a time
Arabs.
when every single one of these Arab countries
Absolutely. Who
their
else kicked
own
them
version
out?
of pan-Arabic nationalism.
Okay, so in this situation, a good test is to take these words and shift them about a little bit. What would Ethan Klein think if someone was to say, someone who he doesn't like at least, was to say, the fucking Jews forced the Palestinians to become violent, or something like that. And then he kept going on to say, it was the Jews who did it. It was the Jews. It was the blame of the Jews. Because that is absolutely one-to-one analogous with what he's saying here. Except in my case, the historical facts are actually accurate. And just regarding the historical facts, I'm going to be releasing another video later this week that specifically covers that. I don't want to cover that too in depth here, but in summary, Ethan tries to frame this as some sort of like uniform expulsion by the Arabs of the Jews, because he wants to justify the Nakba, which by the way happened before this, by claiming that it was merely a response by Jewish victims to what was done to them by this Arab collective, and therefore legitimize the mass expulsion and genocide of Palestinians by Zionists by Israel. It's an attempt to equate Palestinian with Iraqi, Yemeni, whatever other Arab country that he alleges expelled the Jews, in order to say, well, what do you expect? They did it to them, and all they did was respond to it by doing it back to them, when the Palestinians had nothing to do with whatever happened to the Jews in those other countries, because a Palestinian is not an Iraqi. The Arabs is not a thing. And again, I'll be going into more depth on that later this week. But here, I want to zero in on the way that Ethan Klein talks about Arabs here. It's one thing to say, I guess Arabs did it. That would still be very questionable because historically, Arabs did it. I mean, that's a weird way to talk about it, right? I want to say like Iraqi Arabs who held power expelled the Jews, because just saying Arabs expelled the Jews doesn't make much sense, because there was no such thing as this uniform expulsion carried out by some Arab collective. It was individual countries enacting these oppressive policies on Jews of their own volition, of their own accord, independently, over a very long period of time, by the way, but all of which happened after the Nakba, and which they very famously tried to rectify in 1975 by inviting the expelled Jews to come back and get their property back and everything. But the point is, the way that he uses this term, the Arabs, it's literally the same as how a Nazi would use the term the Jews. He frames them as like this collective hive mind conspiring to enact bad things upon us. And using a term like the fucking Arabs just sort of drives that home, doesn't it? Like, imagine someone talking about these things in regards to Palestine, for example, in the way that Ethan talked about this so fluidly, like it just came out from him so naturally. Let's say that someone was to say, the fucking Jews forced the Palestinians to become violent, as I said earlier, but now with all the context that I've just given you. As in, not just saying, Jews forced Palestinians out, because it's true that some Jews did that, you know, the ones who were in Israel, the Zionists there at the time, most of whom were from Europe, not from Arab countries. They factually did expel and genocide the Palestinians. That really did happen. But to say the fucking Jews did it, as if Jews are like this one hive mind, this one collective, all collectively responsible for it. And not just that, but also, you know, the fucking Jews. That's very different, isn't it? That's extremely different from just saying Jews did it, or more accurately saying Zionist Jews did it, or Israeli Jews did it, or just Israelis did it, or just Zionists did it. Ethan Klein doesn't make that sort of clarification. He doesn't say the Iraqis did it, or the Iraqi Arabs did this. No, he just says the Arabs did this. Ethan Klein doesn't make that sort of thing. He doesn't say Arab Iraqis did this. He just says straight up, the Arabs did this. The fucking Arabs are to blame. And just to be clear, the fact that he tries to blame the Nakba, which happened before expulsions of Jews in these other countries, on the Arabs is absolutely insane. As if Zionists were forced to do this, like they went in a time machine and did the Nakba, which happened before this, in response to that, and as if it would even like justify that to like expel and genocide this entirely different group of people and take their houses because you were expelled from an entirely different country. Does that make sense? It doesn't, does it? But I'll be going over that in more detail in the video that I'm releasing on this topic later in this week. My main point of this video is that Ethan Klein talks about Arabs in the way that a neo-Nazi talks about Jews. Once you see it, you can't not see it. And these sorts of tropes, like this collective Arab like hive mind identity thing that Ethan Klein talks about here, are being weaponized in this very day by people who ironically proclaim themselves as like staunch fighters against anti-Semitism, like Ethan Klein. He weaponizes Nazi-style tropes against Arabs in order to justify factual, actual, currently, present-day, ongoing genocide against Arabs, which he, in this very debate, pretended that he acknowledges as a genocide. It's like a Nazi proclaiming himself to be against the Holocaust and then going on to talk about the atrocities of the fucking Jews. It's absurd. So I just want to note as well, importantly, the role of the H3 podcast crew in enabling this, particularly one particularly horrible member of the crew, Abdul Ayad, currently in Los Angeles, California, previously from Dearborn, Michigan. He also goes by the screen name Starkilla with an A, not an ER, and he also goes by the nickname AB. This guy himself made an extremely racist video the day after this debate, in which he denounced another Arab as a barbarian who does not conform to Zionist standards of what an Arab should be, and who thus needs to be denounced as a disgusting barbarian. So let's check that out. Before we watch this, I want to be clear here on Abdul Ayad's role in this podcast. Abdul is a researcher. Like, his job is to sit there and send articles to Ethan, which Ethan receives on his own little laptop, and then Ethan recites. So whenever you see Ethan like recite an Israeli propaganda article verbatim, there's a very high chance that Abdul here has sent it to him. And Abdul is someone who constantly claims to be pro-Palestinian, you know, anti-Israel. He's a staunch advocate for the Palestinian people. And then he sits there in silence as his boss says stuff like the fucking Arabs, as his boss just spouts Israeli propaganda verbatim, saying nothing about it, not opposing it at all. He has absolutely nothing to say about it. But what he does have is a lot of heat for what he sees as bad Arabs. Not good Arabs like himself, but bad Arabs. Ones who are actually really pro-Palestine. Ones who call out the shit that his boss says and does to advocate for the genocide of Palestinians. Check this out.
You're doing a good job, man. You're doing a good job. You know, I'm sure Zionists love you. I'm sure they love you as an example of us Arabs being fucking barbaric. As every fucking person on the internet and every person in the world wants to prove that we're nothing but fucking barbaric animals. You're doing a great job, man. You're doing a great job.
Okay, so that is Abdul Ayad right there, known as AB/Starkilla, denouncing another Arab for not conforming to Zionist standards of what a good Arab should be. Now, to be clear, a Zionist standard of what a good Arab should be is dead, enslaved, or at least on the other side of the world, to the point that they're not their problem anymore. So he's basically saying there that you are a barbaric Arab if you at all are actually opposed to them, if you call them out or anything, if you're not just obedient and silent as he is in every single H3 podcast episode, if not openly, because he does actually speak up quite a bit to like be a token Arab for Ethan's Zionist propaganda. This man, to be very clear, he sat there in silence as Ethan went on that unhinged rant about the fucking Arabs. He said absolutely nothing. In fact, you can bet that During that moment, before and after it, he was straight up sending Ethan Klein Zionist propaganda articles to read verbatim uncritically, which attempted to justify the genocide of Palestinians, who, are Arab. But hey, he's one of the good ones. He's showing the Zionists that Arabs aren't all barbaric. His aim seems to be the last one standing, the last one to be killed, the last one enslaved, the last one murdered, the last one expelled. He's going to show them that Arabs can be what they want them to be, obediently expelled and marginalized for the benefit of the Israeli Zionist ethno-supremacist state. Good on you, man. It's just obscenely racist to use Zionist standards for what constitutes barbaric or not barbaric from an Arab against an Arab person. Honestly, that is absurd. And that he sits self-righteously in his bathtub, slurring drunk through his veneer, saying that is just comical. It's not even offensive. No one could be offended by this guy. His job is already to sit there obediently, totally in the control of a 5'5" Zionist stick figure high on Ozempic all the time. Getting offended by him is kind of impossible. What he said was offensive, but taking it from him, you just can't really get offended by it. Because he's already so pathetic. Like, Ethan Klein himself is beyond pathetic, and this guy is even more pathetic. Abdul Ayad has previously complained that I called him a house slave. Ethan Klein constantly brings up that I called him a house slave, as if, that's just transparently, self-evidently wrong. I want to take that back, though, and I want to deeply apologize for what I said to house slaves, because it's a completely unapt comparison. AB Ayad is not like a house slave. House slaves were forced into that position. They might have been privileged and treated better than other slaves, but ultimately they were still slaves. They didn't really have that much of a choice in the matter. AB Ayad is not a slave. AB Ayad is an employee. He can quit his job and go get another job. So he's not like a house slave at all. He's also not like a capo. Because ultimately, capos, while they did betray their fellow concentration camp inmates, they were still concentration camp inmates. AB is not an inmate, he's not a slave, he's there by choice. If there is a term to use for someone like him who does this by choice, for collaborators like this, none of them come to the top of my head right now, so I'd like to coin one here. AB Ayad is an AB Ayad. This is the new hot term for collaborators just like him. Now, he said in the past, hey man, I'm just trying to feed my family. What I'm doing here is morally neutral. I'm just doing this for the money or whatever. If you were doing this for the money, then why are you, on your own volition, making a video in a bathtub where you accuse other Arabs of being barbaric for not conforming to the Zionist standards of what an Arab should be, which is dead? Obviously, you're totally in on this, and it wouldn't be okay even if you are just sitting there meekly for a paycheck, because you'd still be enabling this. He tries to frame himself as like a poor working class man desperate to put food on the table for his starving family. He's making 6 figures minimum off this. Not even to count like the other social media money that he makes off the fame that he has generated from this podcast. He could leave at any time. He could quit at any time. He doesn't though, because he likes to be there. He likes to be the token Arab. He likes to be the smiling Arab face to Ethan Klein's genocidal Zionist propaganda. He likes to be the smiling Arab face to sit there obediently as Ethan Klein rants about the fucking Arabs, as if they're a hive mind collective like how a neo-Nazi would talk about the Jews. There is no insult for this position that I know of. There is nothing that I would use to aptly describe someone in the situation that he is in. He's a collaborator, sure, but that's not an insult. It's just sort of a statement of fact. And he and Ethan will complain that I'm saying this about him. They'll say to the son, oh my God, but he called AB a house slave. He called him a collaborate, all of this stuff. But they can never actually explain why that's wrong. They can't explain why he's not those things. Because he is those things. I can explain why he's not a house slave. I already did. He's worse than a house slave. Way worse. But they'll never try. They'll never try to refute me. They'll just repeat what I said as if it's self-evidently wrong. As if you shouldn't be allowed to say it. Yet I can explain perfectly, precisely how it's accurate. So, yeah, Ethan Klein talks about the Arabs in the way that a neo-Nazi talks about the Jews. And this is extremely worrying and terrible, because these sorts of conspiracy theories, these sorts of anti-Semitic tropes are literally being weaponized against Palestinians right now to justify genocide. And that is what Ethan Klein is doing here by spreading them. And that is what AB Ayad is helping to enable by sitting there obediently as Ethan Klein does this, as the smiling Arab face, signing off on Ethan Klein's genocidal Zionist propaganda. Not just signing off on it, but actively sending him Zionist propaganda articles to parrot to justify the genocide. So yeah, what else is there to say about these people? Be on the lookout throughout the rest of this week for me debunking Ethan Klein's disgusting Zionist propaganda that he spread all the way throughout this debate with Hassan. Thanks to all of you, except Abdul Ayad.